We will get started. Just so you are aware, this meeting is being recorded. So if you prefer to have your camera turned off, that's absolutely fine. So this is a Q&A session about the online distance learning program for the Psychology Conversion MSc. My name is Dr. Zeba Ghazali Mohammed, and I am the program director for this program. And today is really just giving you an opportunity to ask any questions at all about what the program is like, any questions you have about what it's like to learn as a distance learner, learning online, that sort of thing. Please feel free to either raise a hand using the little icon at the bottom, or equally, you're very welcome to put a question up in the chat and I will prioritize those questions first. However, I also have a list of questions that are kind of frequently asked. So I'll go through those as well if ever we have a little quiet moment. Um, but while we begin, I thought I would just give you a very brief overview of what our program is like. And then certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them because that's really what today is about. It's to answer any niggling questions that you might have. There are absolutely no silly questions. Please feel free to answer or ask anything at all that pops into your head. I'm very, very welcome to do that. And I'll try my best to answer as best I can. So as I mentioned, I'm the program director for the Psychology ODL program, ODL Online Distance Learning. So I've been program director since 2023, and prior to that, I was a deputy director since 2021. So I've been involved with the program for a very long time, actually since I first started joining Glasgow. So the program is really nice and it's really aimed at people who don't have a background in psychology, but are maybe quite keen to learn a bit more about it, or maybe have decided on a career move, or maybe they've been out of education for some time and are returning to education and fancy psychology as a potential route in which to either establish themselves career-wise or maybe just to learn a bit more about the topic as well. So it's a conversion course for that reason. It's aimed at people who do not have a psychology background, or if you're in the UK, for people who might have studied psychology but didn't receive the graduate basis for BPS accreditation. So BPS is the British Psychological Society. They are our accrediting body. So if anybody who is in the UK wishes to go off and become a psychologist, a chartered psychologist, they need to register themselves with the BPS. And in order to become a chartered psychologist, at the very least, you need to have a degree that is accredited by the society. So our conversion program is accredited by the BPS for that reason. And it means that anybody who chooses to go off and do some further study and learn a bit more about psychology and then maybe specialize in a particular area, you have the basis in which to do that and can become a chartered psychologist. Now, this is very specific to the UK. If you are outside of the UK, there are many places that recognize BPS accreditation. So, for example, many European countries will do this. They'll recognize the BPS accreditation and give you your country's equivalent. Outside of Europe, I'm afraid I'm less familiar with what the process is like. And psychology is also sometimes not as established as it is in other countries. So I would say think about what your goal and what your motivations are. If you are thinking about a career in psychology, think about where you wish to be in your home country or whether it's in the UK or elsewhere. And does the BPS accreditation matter to you? In some cases, it doesn't, and that's okay. That doesn't stop you from taking part in this MSc conversion. The conversion still offers you the MSc degree. It still offers you that foundation of psychological knowledge should you wish to go off and become a psychologist. So that's what the conversion does. It's a part-time degree, so it lasts 2.5 years. That is the fastest you can complete the program. Sometimes I get students coming up and asking, can I complete it sooner? The answer is no. It's because it's part-time. We have certain regulations that we have to adhere to in terms of student time. And so the fastest that you can complete the degree is in 2.5 years. However, you can slow the pace down a little bit because we recognize a lot of people that opt for part-time degrees often are maybe carers or have children or are also working and just have lots of things going on in their lives. And so you can slow down the pace a little bit more. And as long as you complete your degree within 6 years of registering, That is acceptable. After 6 years, I'm afraid it's not possible for you to obtain a degree. That's kind of within our university regulations. So we have a kind of minimum period of 2.5 years, a maximum period of 6 years within which you can complete this MSc degree. Okay, so in terms of the kind of content that you'll be learning, because our program is BPS accredited, we teach you all of the kind of basic areas of psychology that's kind of foundational for you, that the BPS says that you should learn. A large proportion of that will be dedicated to research methods. Understanding research, understanding data, being able to work with statistics and to understand what that is telling you is a large part of being a psychologist, and it's actually what makes psychology the psychological science. That's the science bit, the research methods. So sometimes a lot of students are a bit overwhelmed by how much statistics they have to do, but it's something that we don't necessarily expect prior knowledge on. We break it down very clearly for you. We start off, week one is just understanding the software that we use, and we assume no prior knowledge. So please don't let that put you off, but it's also good to be aware that this is a large part of our program. Are there any specific questions at this point about the program, or the content in which we might be sharing? I'll just pause a little moment in case there are any questions being typed up. Or please feel free to raise a hand if you have any. I was wondering about how much of the course is exams versus coursework. So we have no exams. It's entirely coursework. There are various reasons for that, but the main one is obviously because you will all be online distance learners. And so exams are very difficult to administer because of the fact that everybody is in a different time zone. And there's other various reasons for it. But so far, the program is entirely 100% coursework based. Now, that's not to say that there are no exams. Sometimes what we offer are sort of very small stakes MCQs, multiple choice questions, and they're really there to kind of test your knowledge, to make sure that you're comfortable. And as I say, they are very small stakes in that they may be worth sort of 5 to 10% of your kind of course, not the program, just the course. And so they are very kind of small, but the vast majority of your assessments where you will be learning, you'll be graded, will be coursework based. So we have a combination of essays, portfolios, and also reports for research methods as well. Is there any overlap with infant mental health content? Not really, Shona. That's a completely different topic, in all honesty. We will be talking about kind of child development. So we have courses on human development, for example, which talks about infant development, and there will be topics on mental health, but there isn't anything specifically dedicated to infant mental health on our program. And that's really, again, what distinguishes us as a kind of conversion that is accredited by the BPS. So we have to cover certain content in order for you to be able to be registered with the society. In terms of degree destination, how much does each year or module count towards the final designation? All of it does. So you have to have completed all of your first year courses in order to progress onto year two. You have to have completed all of your year two courses in order to progress onto year three, but you cannot do the degree until you have completed all of your year one and year two courses. So everything in the first year is entirely compulsory, or what we call core courses. In year two, half of it is compulsory, and the other half you get a choice of two option courses. Now, while they are optional, they're optional because they are not specified by the BPS in terms of we have to teach you these things, and they will often be based on staff expertise, so things like clinical health. We've had forensic psychology in the past, we've had counselling in the past, we've got educational psychology at the minute, contemporary issues in psychology, and what's another one we've got going on at the moment? Sleep and circadian timing. So these will be based on kind of staff expertise, and students are allowed to pick which two options they would like. But all of the content, all of the kind of grades from each of those courses are combined, and that will form part of your GPA, and that will be entirely part of your degree. So all of it counts. How much would any team projects, or would there be any team projects, or is he completely on my own? I would say majority of the work will be entirely on your own. Where we have group projects are mostly on our research methods courses. So there are a couple of instances, not for everything, but a couple of instances, I think one project in each year, which will be a group-based project, and we do an awful lot to scaffold that. So group work is part of BPS accreditation. Part of the reason is if you are intending on working in psychology, you will have to work in teams. You absolutely have to work in teams. You can't really escape that. It's quite rare as a psychologist that you'll be working completely on your own. Quite often, you do have to work with at least one other person and share and communicate ideas. So it's a really important part of your training. But we do a lot to scaffold that. So we will try and pair you up with people who are in your same time zone. We will facilitate kind of what we call group work agreements that everybody agrees on what it is that they're going to be doing. We have regular check-ins to make sure that people are pulling their weight and are contributing. And so it is very structured and it is very scaffolded. Because I know that sometimes group work can be a bit of a concern, particularly on an online distance learning program where maybe you don't know people as well. But we do an awful lot as a team to try and scaffold that. But I would say that is a small minority of the overall program. Will there be any live sessions or is it 100% asynchronous? That's a really important question. So there are no live sessions. This is an asynchronous degree. Now, that does not mean that you can just go off and take it in your own time. It is almost like structured asynchronicity. So what happens is at the very beginning, you will have your content and the kind of our virtual learning environment. All of the content is released for that week and the next week. So it's always released in 2 week blocks. Now, we have the assumption that you're working on a weekly basis so that you will complete the work for the 1 week in that week and then complete the work in the next week. And we work on a weekly structure. So we'll say, right, this week we're working on X, Y, and Z, or we're teaching you this concept. Next week we'll be talking about ABC. But it's released in kind of 2 week blocks, and then students can organize their time within that 2 weeks to cover all of that content. So if you're part-time working, for example, and you know that Thursdays and Fridays are your days off, you might blitz as much as you can on a Thursday and a Friday. If you are maybe kind of taking a very small and steady approach, that's also fine. So it's really up to you to determine how you work, but none of the sessions are live. The only time we offer live sessions are prior to an assessment. So before an assessment is kind of coming up close, or when we're expecting you to start working on assessment, there will be a live Q&A session about the assessment, and these are always recorded. But that doesn't mean you don't ever get to know your tutors. We have weekly Monday morning check-ins, what I call a Monday message. So we use Teams, Microsoft Teams quite a lot. And your course leads will always message on a Monday and say, okay, hi everyone, this is what we're going to be focusing on. If you have any questions about this week's content, post them up here, and they will always be quite active on Teams and respond to any questions. We also have dedicated staff office hours. So staff will put in when their office hours are, and you can just join an online call as you have today to jump into their office hours and actually talk to them one-on-one. If there is anything that is concerning you, you want to talk about your progress, or maybe it's just kind of general chat about the subject that you might be interested in. So the course, all the programs on the course are entirely asynchronous. There are no live teaching sessions. The only live sessions we have are for assessment support. Okay. And as I mentioned, it is structured. So the assessment deadline is always set. So as long as you complete all of your kind of teaching required content, and you get your assessment in on time, how you structure your learning and your timetable is up to you. We don't provide you a timetable, because it's the fact that it is asynchronous, and you are basically constructing your timetable to work around your own life and commitments and so on. So Sunny, are you able to talk to tutors about the lessons and study? I was quite surprised that few universities have no contact policy. That is absolutely not our. Yes, I have answered your question, but I'll answer it again anyway. That's absolutely not our policy. We encourage you to come to our office hours. And it's actually really nice to get to know students on our program because of the fact that you are, so far away sometimes. We often develop really lovely relationships with our students, and it's because of the fact that they frequent our office hours. So we have office hours on weekly. Students can just drop by, say hello. We can talk about the latest thing that you watched on TV, or we can talk about your career aspirations, or we can talk about something that's maybe bothering you, or any feedback that you have, or maybe just a question that you have about the assessment. And every staff member has these available to them. So it's not just me that you'll get to talk to, but you'll be able to talk to anybody that teaches you, essentially. So yeah, that's something that we would always encourage. And it's definitely not the case that we have a no contact policy. I think that's all of the questions in the chat. Hopefully that's helpful. I do have a couple of others that have been previously submitted, which I'm happy to kind of go over in case there is anything else. Oh, actually, there's another one that's come up. What is the course intensity like? That's a good question. So, because of the fact that it's a part-time degree, the expectation is that you will put in the same number of hours if you were working part-time. So it is intense. And we will always say to students at the very beginning, if you have a full-time job, working on this part-time degree will be very challenging because of the time that is required to be dedicated to it. So for every 10 credit course that we have, so every course in our program, it's about 100 notational hours. So that includes your kind of lecture content that you get, which is maybe about an hour or two, in terms of the activities that we'd expect you to do. But on top of that, there is kind of study time that we expect you to go off and to dedicate towards the course, to do some of those activities, the formative activities, to check your learning. And then, of course, to spend time on the assessments as well. So it is quite intense. And I think that can sometimes surprise people. And by no means is that to put you off. I think it's good to have a kind of very clear understanding of the time and the dedication that we would expect. So it is like having a part-time job. You know, if you work sort of 40 hours a week, well, then we'd expect you to at least dedicate 20 on this program. Um, so yeah, there will be times where some weeks are maybe more intense than others. Other weeks are sort of quieter. Maybe as we get closer to assessment periods, it might start building up. One of the things we do to help you organize your time, however, is right at the start of the year, we will release our calendar for the year, and that includes dates like holidays, but also when your assessments are. So you will know right from the very beginning when your assessments are. So if you are working or you have other commitments, you can see what periods are going to be quite busy. You can plan ahead and go, okay, right, that's a good week to take off from work. I'll do that so I can dedicate my time on that. And so we try and provide you that information right at the start so you know exactly when work's going to be busy and you can plan accordingly. So hopefully that will help, but it can be intense. Certainly, if you are disabled or you are neurodivergent or anything else that you think may impede your studies or impact it in any way, we do have a disability team within our school, and that's not just for physical disability, that also includes things like mental health and, as I said earlier, neurodivergence. You are very welcome to register with them, and certainly you'll be assigned a disability advisor who will then let all course leads know about any particular reasonable adjustments that may be required for you. So if that is a concern, we obviously take that very seriously, and there is definitely support out there available to you as well, should you wish to make use of that. You're very welcome, Sunny. Um, Another question here. So these questions might get answered later, but do students who are planning on applying for a doctorate in clinical psychology usually work in clinical settings outside of the course? Does one need to first finish the course and get chartered basis with charter membership BPS before applying? Yes. Yes. So if you are planning on a career in psychology, for example, clinical psychologist, that is a very popular one. Any of the routes that you take, whether that is clinical, counselling, education, if it's kind of a protected title from the BPS, the British Psychological Society, you absolutely need to have obtained chartered graduate, what's the term? Graduate basis for chartered membership with the BPS. You can only do that once you have obtained your degree. So I have had students who obtain their degree and then apply for clinical psychology. I want to be very clear, and I'm sure you already know this, it is exceptionally competitive, and sometimes just doing a conversion on its own isn't enough to get you onto the program. Quite often they are looking for many years of clinical experience. And you know, it is a competitive field. That's not to say it's unachievable. It absolutely is achievable. And we have students that have gone off and done that. But I don't want you thinking that it is just, you know, a very linear process. Once you've done this, you can go off and do that. It's usually not the case. So many students do often try and get some experience, some relevant experience, either on the program or on the course itself, or sort of during the course. We don't offer any placements or anything, but you can go off and do that alongside. Sometimes people will go off and work maybe as an assistant psychologist after our degree and then work towards getting into clinical psychology. But yes, you would first need to have completed this degree in order to be eligible to even apply. And quite often they want to have seen your degree transcript before that. How big a part are experiments? So, Alistair, experiments, it kind of depends what you mean. So, for example, when you are studying your research methods courses, you won't necessarily be doing experiments and conducting experiment, but you will be working with data that has come from certain studies. And that is really to give you the skills to understand how to analyze it. But then when it comes to your final year, which is your dissertation year, that is when you are showing us what you can do. So in your final year is when you do your experiment or your study. It doesn't have to be an experiment. Um, but you will be paired with a supervisor. You will come up with an idea together as to what it is that you would like to study. This is now your kind of research idea. You will be guided through how to apply for ethics, how to begin recruiting, how to, design and structure your studies, your experiment, beg your pardon, and collect that data, analyze that data, and write it up. That is basically your final year. It's conducting this research report, giving you the skills that an actual practicing psychologist will use. And everything up until that point is helping you gather the information and the confidence that you will have to be able to do that in your final year. Can online students access ongoing research projects or faculty collaborations? It depends what you mean by access. So certainly there will be potential internship opportunities or voluntary opportunities to work on the research side of things within our school. That was always the case, and you'd be welcome to apply. Sometimes these aren't always open for remote working. Sometimes they are. So I can't guarantee that you will be able to get on a research project, but certainly if there are remote ones available, you will absolutely be able to access that. And we have had a couple of successful students in the past that have done so and have done really well. So yeah, it's also kind of dependent on how active you want to be in finding that out. So we've had students in the past, for example, that email particular staff members that they want to work with. And sometimes a staff member will go, well, I don't have an internship, but here, I have some data that I'm trying to wrangle. If you are comfortable doing some analysis for me, we can maybe get something going, that sort of thing. So that can be useful if you want to know a bit more about what research is like, or indeed, just want to get an extra line in your CV to say that you've got a little bit of research experience as well, working alongside a researcher or an academic. That can be helpful. But we don't offer any placements as part of this program. That's not to say you can't do any placements. It's just not something that we offer or facilitate as part of the program. It would be something that you would have to work on independently. Oh, another one. Oh, no, thank you. That makes sense. No problem. So one of the questions I have in the past is, oh, okay, no, I'm going to prioritize the questions in the chat because I think these are important. How do optional courses work? Are there a limit to how many you can take? Yes. So you only get to take 2 option courses and you only get to take them in the second half of your second year. So basically, we have to get all of your core content as specified by the British Psychological Society done first. Then you have the option to pick 2 option courses. So, sort of at the start of the second year, I will advertise what those option courses are. You can start thinking about which ones, take your fancy. And then you get to select 2 from the list that we have. Now, they are always changing and it's to do with staff expertise. So sometimes staff will have a course that they've not advertised before coming up, as we have this year. We've got one on sleep and circadian timing. But occasionally they can change. So we've got one on kind of clinical health psychology, we've got one on educational psychology just now, and one on contemporary issues in psychology. So kind of just having a look at kind of real life problems and how can we apply psychology to those kind of contexts. So yes, the limit is that you can take 2. So one of the questions I have is how are you managing time commitment, or how do you manage time commitments with study and work? Um, this is a tough one because essentially how you manage your time is up to you. We don't provide a timetable because it's asynchronous learning, so that wouldn't really make sense. So what we do try and do is to give you everything that you need to manage your time and effectively. So we will start by giving you a kind of a calendar with all of our kind of dates for holidays and what's happening in the teaching weeks, but also importantly, when all of your assessments are due. So you can start working out your time, when are the busy periods, when are the lighter periods, when do you need to take some time off work if you're working, when do you need to, book yourself into a cabin to start writing your assignments, whatever it might be. So we try and give you that information right ahead of at the start so that you know exactly what you're doing and what you're working towards. But actually, it is a challenge. I'm not going to lie and say it's really easy. It's not. Kind of balancing work and study is particularly challenging. But this is also why we offer even more flexibility. So if for whatever reason you're actually finding that kind of 2.5 year progression very difficult, you can slow down the pace a little bit. So, for example, in the first year, you have to complete 3 courses in semester one and 3 courses in semester two, 6 in total. That might be very challenging. So in the next year, you might go, actually, I want to slow down the pace a little bit. I want to do 2 each semester instead, or maybe 1 in this semester and 3 next semester, whatever it might be. So we can work together on what is known as an alternative plan or an alt plan, and we can slow down the pace a little bit to help you manage your workload a little bit more. As long as you complete your degree within the 6 years, that is absolutely a possibility. But we often encourage students to just try and see how it is, first of all, doing the full load. And if you can manage it, that's probably the best thing to do because then at least you've got people within your cohort that you're building relationships with and will get to know, hopefully. I was wondering if you could clarify the policy around English test waivers, particularly for applicants who completed a UK undergraduate degree taught entirely in English, including through 100% distance learning, example, open university degrees. What factors determine whether a waiver is granted? Thank you. I'm afraid, Katharina, this isn't a question I can directly answer because I'm not part of the admissions team. It would be the admissions team that would be able to answer that for you. Certainly, it sounds like if you have completed a degree entirely in English with 100%, taught in English, I would assume that would be pretty good evidence that you would be fine to complete this degree. But quite often they will ask for evidence. Sometimes they want specific test scores for certain things. I'm not entirely sure what qualifies as a waiver, so my advice there would be to contact the admissions team directly, and they should be able to give you information on that. Sorry, I couldn't help there. I'm afraid I'm just about the teaching. Um, Another question I've had in the past is, will you graduate in person? You can, but you don't have to. So a lot of our students choose to graduate in absentia, which just means that, their name will be in our graduation book, and they will receive their degree parchment in the post, but they won't be there physically to go off and to, shake hands or whatever and walk the stage. However, we do have a small number of students, I'd say increasing number of students actually every year that actually do travel to Glasgow and graduate in person. Last year we had approximately 40 students out of about 70 that travelled to Glasgow for their graduation ceremony. And it was an absolute joy. It was so nice to meet people in person for the first time. We held a little reception afterwards. And it was just really lovely for us to meet them, but also for them to meet each other. It was a really, really nice day, really nice opportunity. That's not something you have to think about just now, of course, but if it's something that is important to you, it absolutely is a possibility, and you can graduate in person should you wish to do so. I'm interested in forensic psychology and was wondering if this will be available in year two. It used to be. Right now, it's still there. However, this is going to be the final year at the minute for forensic psychology for this academic session. The staff member who teaches forensics and has the expertise is leaving and won't be teaching the course next year. And unfortunately, we don't have another forensic psychologist or someone that has the same background and expertise to teach the course. So for the upcoming year, 26-27, forensic psychology is no longer an option. That's not to say it might not ever come back. It may well do. It just depends on staff expertise. And because it's an option course, I'm afraid I can't guarantee that it will be. Um, yeah, I'm afraid that's all I can say. But there will be plenty of other options. What I will say is certainly in terms of your kind of career progression, where you want to go, what it is you want to study, in terms of your degree and what you have studied has absolutely zero bearing on your future career. None at all. It's very rare that I get an application, very rare. It's never happened that I get an application that wants to know specifically what you have taught. They often want to know that you have all of the foundational core degree requirements as set by the BPS because they want to ensure that you do have that graduate basis for chartership, but never about other kind of more specific optional courses. That is never ever asked. The same goes for your degree topic as well. Don't feel that because you want to go into clinical psychology, you have to do some sort of clinical degree topic. Definitely don't. It can be on anything at all, as long as it's psychology related, of course. But it does need to be, yeah, as long as it's something that can specify your skills and we highlight that you've got that graduate member basis of membership, it has no bearing on any kind of future career, postgraduate study, or indeed career option. Okay. How accessible is help if needed during the courses? Very accessible. You have lots of points of contact. So first of all, you have peers. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we use Microsoft Teams very heavily. So we'll always say you should check in on Teams at least once a week, preferably more, but at least once, and to engage with the conversation that is there. So sometimes you might post a question, for example, it might be another class member that answers. You also have your course lead. So this is a person who runs the course. So they will be there and answer questions directly about maybe the content or the assessment, wherever it might be. You then have the option to attend office hours of the course lead. So you can go into their office hours and actually have a one-on-one conversation with them, just like we are having right now. And you can do that individually, you can do that in groups. You then also have support from your advisor of studies. So there is the advisor of studies for each year that you are in the program. So for example, I'm advisor of studies for all year one students. So if you go on and apply, I will be your advisor of studies for the first year. If there is anything going on a personal level or that you are concerned about, or you're worried about your study progression, or you want to know a bit more information about extensions, or you're worried that you can't submit in time, anything like that, that's a bit more less course specific, but maybe a bit more kind of studies general. You can talk to me and we can arrange a plan and think about support needs on that front. So that's already three sources of support. In addition to that, if you are registered with the Disability Services, you'll have the support of a Disability Services advisor who again can speak to you about your support needs. And in addition to that, number five, there is also a student support officer. So this is someone who is a bit more informal, can tell you a bit more about things like where to get student support, services like mental health, counselling, all that sort of stuff, career service. They can kind of signpost you to the relevant people. So that's five sources of support already, but it's very accessible. At least I would like to think so. And I know students definitely do provide a lot of feedback to us about the fact that they appreciate being able to talk to lots of people about various things. Um, oh, okay, fabulous. What does a typical week look like in terms of workload? So this is a good question. So within a particular week, it probably helps to know that you have about three courses per semester. So in the first semester, for example, you would have research methods, you would have CHIP, which is contemporary and historical issues in psychology, and you would have human development. So you've got three courses. Within each of those courses, you will have all of the content that is released. So there will be kind of bits of a lecture. There might be sort of 15-minute videos that you need to watch, and that's part of the lecture, or slides that you could review. And you have to do that for each of those courses. You then have to do all of the recommended essential reading for each of those so that you've got kind of more background knowledge, excuse me. You then have to also think about any particular activities that the course lead might have set. So it might be have a look at this YouTube video that explains this experiment, or complete this short MCQ quiz and test your knowledge on what you've read. Um, and you'll have that for each of the three courses. So while it doesn't sound like a huge amount, actually, by the time you've got through everything, it will take up a significant bit of time, which is why I said, you have to treat this part-time degree as though it is a part-time job. It will take the same amount of time, at least if you're doing it well and are not going to be too overwhelmed by the time. So that's not to say that it is unachievable. It's very achievable if you work and have support around you. It really depends on individual circumstances. I've had students who have worked full time and have completed their degree, but they have also complained about how difficult it has been. I have had other students who don't work, but maybe have other responsibilities like childcare, for example, and have to be very flexible about when they find the study time to work. I think it depends on what are your individual circumstances, how much time do you actually have realistically in a week to dedicate towards study. If it's around the 20-hour mark, you're probably okay. If it's less than that, I would think about, well, what other options do you have around you? Do you have a support system, for example? Do you have friends and family around if you have children that can help watch the children for a little bit, a couple hours every week so you can dedicate your work or some time towards doing your work? Um, Other things like that. I think you will know yourselves best. You will know how long things take you. You will know the time that you have to play around with. But yeah, I would say in terms of workload and hour equivalents, it will take you the same amount as a part-time job. Are there opportunities to connect with other students, forums, group chats, meetups? Yes, is the answer. So right at the very beginning, we encourage you all to sort of introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from. We try and facilitate study groups. Some students love a study group, so we'll try and facilitate that. And again, we'll try and arrange that so that it's similar time zones for people. Sometimes I know students often create their own WhatsApp groups, and that's not something that is managed or run by us, of course. But I know lots of students do that and occasionally do, I know there was a London WhatsApp group, for example, for everyone who is in London, and they would occasionally meet up. So yes, there are things to on that front in terms of kind of more social aspects. However, as I said, we do have Microsoft Teams, which we encourage you all to engage with and talk to each other on. And so you'll begin to start to recognize names. There will be opportunities for kind of group work as well for your RM modules. And there will be certain forum discussions as well that we'd encourage you to take part in. I know for sort of one course, social psychology, for example, you're encouraged to kind of share opinions and I think they're called debate forums, put an idea across and kind of seeing how the psychological literature fits in with that. So, in short, lots of opportunities to connect with other students. Um, I think that's most of the questions. Are there anything else from anyone that you'd like to know a bit more about, maybe that I've missed a little bit? Can't see anything. Something else students want to know about is about early exits, which is probably worth mentioning. So, there are certain points in your degree that you can exit early should you wish to do so if you don't actually want to do the degree. So, after your year one, if you've completed all of your year one courses, so that's 60 credits, you are eligible to graduate with a postgraduate certificate. After year two, so if you've completed all of your year one and year two courses, and that's 120 credits, you are eligible to graduate with a postgraduate diploma. And it's just once you've done the dissertation at the end, then that is a full degree. But, let's say at the end of year two, you've decided actually that's kind of enough, or I'm not that bothered about getting a degree. I'm not really thinking about chartered psychology status. I was just interested in the topic or whatever it might be. Um, you are able to uh, exit early and graduate with a diploma. Could you elaborate on what a typical week in the course entails? Um, uh, it will entail having a look at lecture recordings. It will entail having a read of all of the recommended reading for that course in a particular week. And it will entail doing any other activities that might be set by the course lead. So it could involve looking at a YouTube video. It could involve listening to a certain podcast. It could involve doing a short MCQ to kind of talk about your knowledge. It could involve writing a post on the forum to engage with the group. So there'll be kind of different activities that will be set by the course leads. But as a kind of basic level, it will always be watching the lecture content, looking at the slides, and doing your recommended weekly reading. So that will always be the case week on week on week. But you'll be doing that for 3 courses per semester. Are you able to give us some recommended reading that may give us a flavor of the course? There isn't any particular recommended reading. We're a BPS accredited conversion degree, so I would say if you pick up any sort of general good and recent psychology textbook, that will probably give you a lot of information as to the sorts of things that you can expect to cover on our program, because it will be a kind of foundational psychology module. What you're doing is basically a really compressed psychology degree in 1 year at an MSc master's level. So it's pretty intense. Even though it's part-time, it's still pretty intense in terms of the information that we're providing. But in terms of content and topics, any sort of good psychology textbook in general, there's also lots of online textbooks that are freely available, accessible that you can use, things like NOBA. The NOBA textbook is quite good. I'll put that in the chat. Quite often in year one, we'll sometimes link to the NOBA textbook for general kind of topics around psychology. So, yeah, I would say there isn't kind of specific reading, but generally speaking, any sort of introductory psychology textbook is quite good to get a sense of the sorts of things that you'll be covering. Yeah, that should help. Okay, please feel free to raise a hand if you have any other questions as well. And as a, do we do all three courses concurrently? We perhaps can, no, it's concurrent. It's concurrent. This is why it's quite intense. It is concurrent, um, which is why I say, it is like having a part-time job because you'll be doing all three at the same time. And this is on a part-time basis. So in year one, you the courses that you cover are Research Methods 1, which runs throughout the year. And then in semester one, you have conceptual historical issues in psychology, human development. And in semester two, you have still going with RM1, physiological psychology and cognitive psychology. So all in all, that is 5 courses that you'll be covering in 1 year. And we split the year basically in terms of workload. So, yep, um, it's quite intense. Okay. Any other questions? I can have a look at my list and see if there's any that could be useful to share. Um, I often get asked about having a physical student card. It's absolutely not something you need as part of the course. I know some students really like to have one just as either a memento, but otherwise it can be quite useful to access libraries that are maybe more local to you, specifically university libraries. So we don't give them out as standard, but you can order one once you are enrolled and registered on the program. It's possible for you to order a university card if you would like one, and that will give you, access to student discounts and things as well. That can be quite handy. Do you have any optional in-person meetups during the program or are they unofficial? Yeah, it's totally unofficial. If you're in Glasgow and you're local or you're not too far, as we do have some students that are like that, you will always have the option of turning up for kind of any seminars that might be going on in the university. Quite often, a lot of our seminars are hybrid, so we will advertise them anyway. But if there's any that you would like to turn up to in person, you're very welcome to do that. We also have lots of societies and lots of networks within the School of Psychology. So, for example, we have a race and equality network, a neurodiversity network, an LGBTQ plus network. They will sometimes have lots of events going on. And again, if you're in the area, you would be more than welcome to come along. As a student, you could do that. You could still make use of study spaces. You could go to the library, for example. Um, but these are not compulsory, they're absolutely not mandated. And being an online distance learner, it is not expected that you will be here to do any of that. But that doesn't mean that you are not allowed to do any of that if you're around or if you are certainly local or close enough. But yes, sometimes unofficially, lots of people decide to meet up where they are. We had a lot of students from the UAE 1 year, and I know a lot of them sort of met up as well. Um, yeah, what we try and do at the beginning is get a sense of where everyone is from when you introduce each other, and that can sometimes help. I'm under the impression that we will still have access to university online. Yeah, of course, you will always have access to the library. We will never, at the University of Glasgow in psychology, we will never ever ask you to buy books, buy textbooks, or journal articles. That is absolutely not a requirement on our program. We feel very strongly about open science and that kind of knowledge should be available to you. So any recommended reading or any essential reading, especially that is on the course that we want you to have read for our courses, will be freely and widely available online through our library. Equally, any textbook chapters that we give you will either be available in the library or will be like NOBA, for example, which again is a freely accessible resource that anyone can access. Equally, depending on where you are in the world, you as a student will also have access to full kind of Microsoft software that you're able to download. You just have to be enrolled and registered onto our program. So anything in terms of software, anything in terms of reading content that you might require to study, we will provide you. And yes, if you were to get a university card, sometimes other university libraries will allow you to visit them. You might not be able to check books out. Some universities allow you to, some don't. It's kind of on a case by case basis. But at the very least, you'll be able to visit and get in, and at least temporarily. So that can sometimes be quite helpful. Any other last minute questions? I realize that I've been speaking for quite a bit. Um, okay. I think most of the questions I have on my list have also been asked. There is one about payments, when are tuition payments due? So generally what happens is at the start of the year, once you are registered onto our program and have decided to commit to the program, we will ask you to enroll on the courses. So depending on how many courses that you have enrolled on, you will then be kind of charged per course, per module. And you can either pay in full at the start of the year or you can choose to pay in installments. And that is an agreement you make with the finance office. It's not something I can offer help or advice with, I'm afraid. But you have the option to pay in installments. Um, yeah, it's entirely up to you. We have lots of people as well that have received funding from elsewhere to kind of fund their courses. That is also acceptable onto our program. Um, do people actually do this course out of interest, not necessarily to get a career out of it? You would be surprised at how many people do this course out of interest and not because they want a psychology career or because maybe they're just not sure if they want to do psychology career. And so they do this course to decide whether they like it. And if they like it, they continue. If they don't, they'll go off and do something else. You get a lot of transferable skills from doing this course. Lots of kind of knowledge generally about how to write, how to use R code and software. And a lot of students go off and work in data science, for example. So, yeah, there's quite a number of people that don't necessarily go for the full degree. It also depends where you are from in the world. Psychology, its value, its how well established it is as a field in different countries will vary. And so not everybody actually needs the full degree. Sometimes people just go for the postgraduate diploma, and they get an awful lot out of that. So sometimes, yeah, you people have very different reasons as to why they come back and study. Um, and sometimes that is also to become a psychologist, sometimes not so much. You're very welcome. Are there times during the week that we should attend classes on time? No, there are no class times. It's entirely asynchronous. So we will share all the information at the beginning of the week. We always have a Monday message. So I always say Monday's a really good time to just check in and check your team's messages. I would download the app on my phone or iPad or tablet, whatever you have going for you. um, access it just to make sure that you're aware of any announcements and what's going on. And once you have all of that information, then you can choose when you want to study within the week. That is up to you how you manage your time, but there are no in-person classes, therefore there is no timetable. It's up to you how you manage your time. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but I will certainly hang around for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, I really hope that this has been a helpful Q&A. If you have a last minute questions, please feel free to stick around and put it into the chat. Equally, you're very welcome to email me and get in touch, and I will do my best to share information with you. There is an awful lot of information on our website, including a webinar that should be recorded and accessible on there as well, where I share a lot more information. There's also slides, so I share a little bit more about what our virtual learning environment looks like, what you can expect to see. And there's a lot of information on there as well. So I hope that you found that interesting. I hope that maybe it's been reassuring to know a bit more about what it's like to study an online distance learning program. Um, and I hope to see you soon, possibly in September. So good luck, everybody. Pleasure meeting you all, and hopefully see you soon. You're very welcome. Goodbye. Bye, everyone. Bye. See you later. Bye bye.